We're back. How's it going, guys? We're on air. WICR Political Gridiron.
Another clash of left versus right.
Another clash of the clans, as they may say. Excited for another spin around with So what are our topics today? We have going.
Well, we're gonna talk about the morality of killing.
Yeah, we're gonna
in
talk
war.
Exactly. So we're gonna go
morality
over
of war, basically.
Yeah, so we're gonna go over groundworks, just so we have a little bit more free range of topics. So we're not just stuck on one. We can go a little bit more above and beyond, I'd say, in the realm of politics, and then we'll tie it up at the end with a little bit more of the preliminary presidential campaigns, some retrospects and who we may or may not see. Right. So this will be good. I'm excited. So
let's get this going.
The way I wanted to kind of start it out, I mean, I had a few notes. So, I mean, I kind of wanted to go more over on the basis of battlefield ground theory. So, it goes kind of mostly on just how, I don't know, for me, more than anything, it's just how you go about, rationalizing, killing someone on the battlefield. And I feel like that's such a toll. And I remember, I think it might have been Reagan who said this. I don't know if it is exactly, but it's one thing to serve your country, and it's another thing to actually physically kill for your country. And I feel like these two different paradigms really brought up something, invigorous. So I wanted to see what your opinion was, essentially, Bill. And then I think we can moreover go on into the, the war on terror and just past attacks, more or less.
Well, to paraphrase General George Patton.
Oh, was that who it was?
No,
okay, sorry. I thought you were correcting me.
I'm going to go with the quote.
Okay.
To paraphrase General George Patton, who actually, I have letters at my grandfather's house from.
That's awesome.
That he sent to my grandmother's mother, my great-grandmother. But because she used to write letters to him for his birthday, poetry. Right. So that's nice. But anyways, General Patton said that the goal of war, basically, to paraphrase, is to go make the enemy die for their country.
Exactly.
So I think that when looking at war, and it's not as if we're talking about shooting someone on the streets or a civilian.
Exactly.
We're talking about our enemy.
Our enemy.
And in war, I believe that killing is justified, and that actually there is a sense of honor to being that American sniper. There's a sense of honor. And I believe that if we are to go violate that sense of honor that belongs to these true heroes out there that are actually killing our enemies, then we are doing disservice to them, to ourselves, and to our country.
Well, can you specify more about who our enemy is? I mean, I know there was times for instance, the Vietnam War where a lot of the times, I remember people saying how they were confused as to who the enemy was most of the time when they went in throughout the cities, and they were also extremely even in today's warfare. For instance, the Iraqi war, you'll see insurgents that are just as plainly dressed as any ordinary citizen. So there is a huge discrepancy on who the actual enemy is.
Well, Pat, there is a line of thought. And I believe that it was a cleric during one of the Crusades that said this to a soldier in the Crusades, and the soldier, he was confused about what people are their enemies in the towns and what ones aren't their enemies. And the cleric told him, I believe, kill them all, let God sort them out. And I believe that there is a line of thought, definitely in the military, that does agree with that. Kill them all, let God sort them out.
Total war. There's that total war theory.
The ones that belong to God will go to God. The ones that aren't, they'll go wherever God chooses to send them. But I think that there's also that confusion, definitely in the Vietnam War, and also in the wars in the Middle East right now, on who are our enemies and how do we really decide, because it's very vague and kind of arbitrary when you have a civilian helping the Taliban, and are they just pressured into it, or are they actually helping them?
Exactly, and I feel like I think most Americans also kind of like to identify, mostly like what we talked about last week about how there are some Quran, Americans do distinguish like the Quran and Islam as a whole as more of a hate against the West necessarily. So it is kind of more of a discrepancy on who the actual enemy is when it comes down to it. And I think most of the time Americans act off of that hate, especially on groundwork like missions that when they're going into civilized towns or like where there is a huge chance of civilians. And I remember as we talked about last week how Chris Kyle and all this controversy that also brought up throughout the movie about, I mean, most of the shots the guy took, and I thought one of the most powerful things is when he talked about it in his book. He stated that he has no regrets about his works as a sharpshooter, saying that I had to protect the Marines. Now, when you look at something like that in a life and death situation, and you see a woman and a child holding an IED, a grenade, there are a lot of things going through an individual's mind, like, that's a child. There's a woman bearing a child.
Well,
and you have to, Pat. Well, hold on. And you have to set that aside, and you have to go, well, there are a group of individuals, like there's a group of Marines not standing that far. I have to take that shot.
Yes.
She's an insurgent. And in retrospect, you have to look through their point of view and understand how sick and, just all out wrong in which they're going about something like this. And I feel like with ISIS and all these different like groups that are in the Middle East, you see how they'll act off of anything. They'll get off of scrap work just to be able to get the job done. And most of the time it blatantly doesn't because of just overdrawn, masses that the United States provides with its military. And it's been proven to be effective. And I don't know. I mean, what kind of stance do you take on this, Bill?
Well, Pat, I think that especially in warfare, and especially here in America, and we've seen it with President Harry Truman with the 2 nuclear bombs in Japan, but I think that they apply to the philosophy made famous by the great German philosopher Immanuel Kant and utilitarianism. What is going to bring about the greatest happiness? And I think that they believe that the greatest happiness is that if you're Mr. Kyle, you shoot the woman, because if you don't, she's going to go kill all these Marines that are here protecting what we know as the United States of America, this free ground of democracy.
And that's funny you mentioned that. Actually, that's from my experience. That's actually neo-utilitarianism is what she's trying to oppose.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a conflicting theory that you actually brought up. I think there's a more cosmopolitanistic view when you can see it, and that's just more of a general worldview. And really, realistically, is what you look for is you see two societies acting upon each other. Well, hold on. You see two societies acting upon each other, trying to promote utilitarianism, and from the point of view of the other society, you see that as a neo-utilitarianistic. It's something that goes against. It's something that goes against our way of living, and I feel like that is definitely brought up in that movie, as you said. But I thought it was brought up in such a powerful way, in a stance that like it really brings into retrospect the sniper's just the sniper as a whole, and like those split-second decisions that you have to, this is a civilian by day, but by night she's taking out Marines.
Well, Pat, in a more simpler and clearer phrase of utilitarianism, I believe that they're just trying to see in what way are you going to have more people live for your side, and in what way are you going to have more people die for their side than yours. So I don't really think that they're looking about the total happiness for their society, or really having a cosmopolitan.
How so? How can you?
Well, Pat,
looking for the greatest amount of good for themselves, No.
I think that when you're talking about the issue of the greatest good, I think that the USA, when they're looking at foreign wars and foreign issues, they're only focusing on the USA. They aren't focusing on the common good or the good in the other countries that they're opposing.
So it's not a cosmopolitanistic view.
No, definitely not. And I think that they're trying to dominate as much as they can, and I think that it's rightfully so, because if you're in war, and you have to understand the realities of war, when in that split second you aren't thinking about the feelings for this other person, because if you aren't doing the right job in war. You have to think about basically you have to apply what General Patton said, and you basically have to ensure that your side has more people at the end of the battle than the other side. And I think that that's the most clear objective that anyone can have. But we also have to talk about, and we touched on this last week, that the only that one of the main problems with this idea is that this whole utilitarianism objective to killing and winning wars is that it thinks that the war is won just on the battlefield, when really you also need the war to be won in the hearts and souls of the people and the countries that you're in. And that is one of the reasons why we did lose in Vietnam, or it didn't come out prevailing.
So what do you think? So how would you truly define the efforts in Vietnam then? I mean, for instance, you see how failed we had a good advantage towards the beginning, but then it just all out started to fail. Even though it was the biggest, we sent more troops there than we ever did before in American history, and it was the biggest bloodbath known.
Well,
I mean,
Pat,
but how do you find success from something that came out of utter failure?
Well, Pat, when you look at it, I think that it really doesn't matter how many people you send, as long as you have an adequate amount. I think that more than anything, and to quote sports and other slogans, it's really about the size of the heart and the dog. It's not about the size of the dog. So if you have a weak army there that really isn't motivating, that's what we had in Vietnam. We had a whole bunch of punks out there who really, they were more interested in smoking dope back home and engaging in free love up at Woodstock than really taking out.
In Vietnam, they weren't even recognized when they returned. Those individuals weren't even recognized when they returned because of those individuals.
Pat, those individuals in Vietnam during that time period, they didn't fight.
What do you mean they didn't fight? There was the most casualties you've ever seen in battlefield history.
Pat, they weren't fighting with their hearts. They were fighting with their
how do you know
with their bodies. Because, Pat, when they came back, they were outside Richard Nixon's White House, and they were protesting.
Because they didn't win the war.
No. We didn't win the war because at home there was a domestic uproar against the war.
Yeah, and especially so because that was during the same period. I mean, the 60s. I really can't speak much about it, but
Pat,
you can't argue that in an army.
Pat, that's an issue even here today. America cannot prevail. America won't prevail to the extent that it can prevail if at home you have a domestic division where veterans and soldiers and people in the armed forces are marginalized.
Yeah, but you
need total support.
Yeah, but you can't prove that these men didn't fight honorably. It's the United States Army.
Pat, when you come back, when you come back from war and you start bashing the war in the military.
What, these individuals? These
do you know the history of the Vietnam War? People were coming back.
Right.
And they were saying that I oppose the war for this, that, and that. You cannot,
like these servicemen.
These people that served when they came back from their tours of duty.
Right.
So how do you expect that they were fighting with full hearts in battle and that they were really determined to win when all of a sudden they come back home and they're protesting outside of the White House smoking joints? How do you believe that they are fighting with full hearts?
I don't know how much I believe that, to be honest with you, but
for what reason?
Just because
these
were servicemen. These were servicemen that served their country honorably, no matter where they sent them. These Marines would have gone anywhere had it been. They would have gone to the moon and back just to defend the United States. You can't just go up and say, "All right, I went over there. I didn't dodge."
Pat.
Well, rightfully so. These men didn't dodge the draft. These men showed up at that doorstep. Said, "America, where are you sending me to pay for the price of freedom?"
No, they did not. Because if they
were there.
No, they did not. Because
they were in Vietnam.
If they took that narrative, then they would not be coming back home and protesting the war.
They can protest it's a freedom of speech. That's what makes America
and also when we look at the narrative about people protesting the wars and everything, how do you expect America to really be united in its fight against global threats such as terrorism and nuclear threats?
Yeah, but there's always going to be people with subjective views on it. Like you can't just say that these people didn't fight honorably. These are our servicemen.
But one of our biggest problems here in this country is that we actually give a voice to these people to go say, "Oh, we don't agree with the military." If you don't agree with the American military, leave America, because the American military is what made America so great.
Yeah, but it wasn't the groundworks of which it was created.
What?
It wasn't.
Please specify. Please fill in that.
The military state is not what America is all about. America was.
It's a form
of defense against anything else that goes against us. We built a country based on a philosophy, not a militaristic state. Our military is there to help aid us in that state. And I'm not saying anything against them. And that's in no way is my statement in no way is my statement protruding towards that. But the fact that you say that these servicemen go over to Vietnam and are completely left aside when they come back is also an ignorance of to America towards its veterans. You know,
it's not.
There was millions of veterans on the streets to this day. I mean, and
it is not. And also, no.
I don't understand how these people. I don't understand how America
Pat,
doesn't take care of our veterans.
Pat,
I don't understand that. Can you explain to me how America takes care of our veterans?
Okay. Well, first we will look at the difference between veterans of certain wars. If you look at veterans of the World Wars and the Korean War, those were people fighting for America. That was in a time and society and culture in America where people actually believed in Uncle Sam and that the bald eagle should be flying high and roaring. Now, all of a sudden you go to the 60s and the 70s, you have people smoking dope up in Woodstock, not too far from here. And that is dangerous. And we see that same philosophy being celebrated in our modern culture, where we see on MSNBC, where we see the President of the United States go to the National Prayer Breakfast, and he attacks Christians. He attacks the military everywhere. Now, if you want to go say that our country was not built on the military, you're right. But the country was built on this philosophy that you mentioned, but you didn't specify.
I didn't specify.
You didn't specify what philosophy.
I did not. Yeah, you're right.
But it was built on the philosophy that when we see something wrong, we will raise our arms and bear arms. And you also have to realize, and I think that this is...
I disagree with that.
Hold on.
But continue. No, please do.
I think that there's a common misconception in this country that there's a division between philosophy and ideology that this country is built on, and all the applicables, such as Department of Defense and all the other departments. They go hand in hand, they're meshed together. And if you strip one of the other, that is dangerous, because for a department to succeed, the department has to go hand in hand.
Well,
with philosophy.
I feel like each individual department of our state has something to do with the contribution of a specific portion of our society. But I feel like the military is also a portion of of society that is supposed to be left towards to do what it's supposed to be doing. And I believe that it's been doing that effectively since God knows how long. I mean, since the beginning of our country. And for you to go up and say that the veterans of a certain war didn't give their all, didn't give their heart, they've just been smoking dope the entire time, is a bit shameful, because you can't just...
Pat, I did not say all. Pat, I did not say all. I said a certain group of veterans from the Vietnam War.
Well, was it a good portion of them? Because, I mean,
a good portion of them, and that's why we lost. We lost because...
Based off of
we lost because Johnson and Nixon were too weak to go stand up for what really needs to be done.
Well, so you're saying this group of individuals...
What really should have been done is we should have had some more arms.
Well, no, just to specify, you said this group of individuals.
We should have nuked Vietnam.
I mean, napalm, we did all we could.
No, we did not.
With the technology we had?
No, because 30 years earlier, there was a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, and that took 10 years to develop. The atom bomb took at least 10 to 5 years. I don't know how long, but it took a decent amount of time.
No,
I can Google. I can get you a certain number right now.
Pat, it took a certain amount of time to go understand how to build it. But once you actually know how to build it, it really doesn't take that long. Hence, why we have so many.
Yes, nowadays, because we're living in a more modern age than the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was
Pat, they could have nuked Vietnam then and there.
Well, they did the best they could with the artillery that they were providing.
No, they had nukes. They could have done that.
Well, then how effective would that have been when there's no society at all?
What?
Then there's nothing to counteract whatever is going against them. There's nothing. If you
just wiped out everything then.
If you nuke every civilian and armed force in Vietnam, you just eliminate the entire subject to itself. You have nothing else to fight for. It's done.
You won the battle.
Then the whole point of the battle in the first place was pointless.
Pat, there was once a time in America where we didn't question the use of a nuclear bomb, and that's when America was great with Harry S. Truman as our president. And that was a religious man, who did understand that this is what had to be done. And if America has gotten even weaker, that we haven't even declared a war against ISIS. We still haven't declared a war against our domestic threats, such as the radical Islam here in this country, and all these other.
Could you specify radical Islam in the country?
Yes.
What do you mean?
Okay.
Because I mean, we've been bouncing around a lot of topics on
Yes.
on this.
Well, when you have a country that how should I put this? In our country, we have a certain group of people in the population that are now going over to ISIS and aiding them. And they're both men and women. You have men fighting for them, and you also have women on the other side serving as their sex slaves and cooking for them. And, I find that to be appalling. And if we really don't crush down on these people...
Because of the way their way of life, the way they organize their life? Because the
way that they organize their life is evil. If you think that going over to ISIS is not evil path, and
I don't know what you mean by going over to ISIS.
There are people that are signing up to go kill Americans.
Yes, there are.
For ISIS, and they're going over there. There are women lining up to go cook for the militants in ISIS and to go be their sex slaves.
Well, that occurred during World War II for the Germans. There were a group of Germans that did. There's always going to be people like that.
But these are Americans, and
This is an issue. Like you said, they left. You want to be an American, you leave.
And we have to also.
Whatever happened to that theory?
We also have to go tackle.
Well, so at first it was our problem. Oh, it wasn't our problem, and now it is our problem.
Wait. When did we ever say it wasn't?
Well, no, you told us earlier today that if you don't like the philosophies that are based in our military, that are based in our departments, that are based on our groundwork of our government, you should just leave.
You should.
That's what you said. And now that these people are not believing, now you're telling them that we need to tackle the issue and rehabilitate. I just don't understand which form should we do?
Okay, Pat. To clarify, if you don't agree with America, please leave. But the philosophy does not leave when they leave. The philosophy still is here. The philosophy is malignant until we tackle the cancer that is the philosophy that radical Islam and ISIS is spreading in here, because it is juxtaposing us all to a dangerous situation that very well might mirror 9/11 and the Boston bombings.
So let's go back to the military. You stated earlier that we have a groundwork for philosophies, and for instance, we have to be the first ones to attack essentially when it comes to what is known as ISIS. Am I wrong?
Well,
so we have to be the first people to attack to be able to obliterate. So why don't we just nuke down? Would you not agree upon nuking down all of what is Iraq and ISIS? Is that what you were insinuating with your statement about Vietnam and how we should have just nuked the entire place to win over communism?
I definitely think that there is a time and a place for using the nuclear weapon.
Okay.
I don't know if we're at that time yet, because this is a different...
10 years in.
Well,
I mean, we learned with Vietnam after 30 years.
Well, Pat, this is a different battle than the ones we were facing with North Korea, and Vietnam, because the issue of North Korea and Vietnam, the philosophy wasn't as strong, meaning it didn't really have the vigor and the strength to move forward and spread its malignant evil ways as much as the whole way of radical Islam does. Because when you look at the issues, communism doesn't have that magical sense to go capture people as really radical Islam does, and making people really do things.
Okay, but do we experience something like this in the United States day by day?
So first we have to tackle the philosophy and definitely have to bear arms.
We have tackled the philosophy.
No, we have not, because that philosophy has spread to France, Europe. It has spread to all of our allies. It has spread to all of our allies. It has also spread here.
We haven't seen. We don't understand the philosophy behind it, but it's spread. What is the philosophy behind this then?
Behind ISIS.
Well, what are they trying to spread?
I think that we spoke about this in the last.
Well, yeah, but just for clarification.
Just for clarification.
What is the direct opposition? What is ISIS trying to? Well, let's look at the word ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Greater Syria, right?
Yes.
So what is their objective?
Well, I believe that when looking at the whole threat of radical Islam, that ISIS promotes, it's really that they hate the West, and that includes our allies in Europe, and that they hate the American way of life, because the American way of life is one that celebrates Christianity and Judeo-Christian principles, and one that in their eye really is a little bit too liberating of feminism and females, but also
So what is their
but
objective?
but also they feel like they've been subjugated to us, and you also have to look at the term Islam and Muslim, where it means submission, and they view themselves as being part like a slave.
Well, I think we'll tackle this right after
We'll
the
tackle
break.
this
We'll
after
tackle this
break
right
for
after the
greater
break. Appreciate
clarification,
it.
but
We'll go right into it.